Welcome to the World Cup, and we are talking which players need this World Cup the most. Who do you have, Chuck?
I think I've got the Argentine GOAT. I think Messi needs this World Cup. And reasons are he's been close to winning stuff with Argentina for so long. And I mean, yes, he captured the Copa, and that was happy, emotional. There was lots of fanfare. But for me, it seemed that the one thing that's eluded him, especially if you look at their comparisons with the next Maradona, was that World Cup trophy. And he came close in 2014 and didn't quite get the prize. And he was distraught. Let me put it that way. He was distraught. If you look at the fact that this is World Cup number 5, there is no chance after this to go get another World Cup. And if he does go to the World Cup, I don't think he's got the same players that he's going to the World Cup with. They're on a winning run. If there's ever a time to capture the World Cup, it is right now. And so I think he needs it just for him to be, I mean, look, it's a GOAT argument, and I think that seals it if he gets the World Cup. Like, regardless of what happens now afterwards, if Messi gets the World Cup, and I think he needs it because it's the story without that punchline, without the ending, and the World Cup, I think, is the final chapter to Messi's book of greatness. So I think he needs it.
So I would disagree to that because I know why that mantle has been placed on him. Similarly with Cristiano Ronaldo. I think Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, because I have Messi as number 1 in the GOAT rankings, he's got the most to gain on Lionel Messi if he wins a World Cup. But I also don't think he needs one. I don't think Messi needs one as well. I think if you're looking at guys who've been at the top for 15 to 20 years and have produced the way they've produced, they've won everything they've won, and they've given the kind of performances over a period of time that we have never seen from any other players in history. I think to say that their careers come down to the Single Cup, which is the most storied of all the trophies available in football, and I get that. And I do think winning the World Cup holds the potential to elevate your legacy more than any other tournament, more than any other trophy, whether individual or team accolade. So I can see what it could do for them, but I wouldn't say that they need it because I don't think it's a lesser career from either one of them if they don't win this World Cup, because those are the guys they are compared to have won the World Cup. In some instances, you can make the argument that they did not come close to doing what they did in club football, and that's a matter then of taste in terms of what counts more and what counts less.
Would you not say, though, in terms of not necessarily needing it to elevate their career or to cement them as the GOATs, but the fact that it's almost an injustice that they're this good and they've been playing in this era, and in a lot of cases with great teammates in both the Portuguese and the Argentine sides, that they haven't quite got it. So for me, it's like this is the last thing that confirms your great, not confirms because or validates, but adds to it. So for me, it's almost like an injustice that, man, you should get something. Because there are players like Mario Götze who've just had that little spell, fallen down the hill, and Götze was good when he was playing at that particular time. But they're anonymous players in the annals of history who've claimed a trophy. When the greatest of players, when we're talking about Maradona, we're talking about Pele, they've captured it. So for me, especially when we talk about that we've been blessed that we've seen both of these GOATs in our time, it would be great as well if these GOATs got to capture that. Because if you're having an argument with a 50-year-old and you're like, I raised Messi, and they still bring to you that World Cup,
I tell them they're ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it puts a very pretty bow on these careers. When I give who I think needs the World Cup the most is because in terms of what has happened up to this point or where they are at this point in their careers, it's not where these guys are. Messi and Ronaldo have not disappointed for me at all. Even if they don't win the World Cup, yes, it's something that is missing from their CVs, and yes, it pretties it up that much more, and it puts them in a category with those all-time greats. But as you have put with Mario Götze, you can be a hanger-on. At the time he wasn't, but when you look at his career now, and you look back at the fact that some players like Thomas Müller have greater World Cup legacies than a Ronaldo and a Messi, I think that's something that you say in isolation, though. It says nothing of that particular player against those guys. The guys who are at in that exclusive room, Pele, Zidane, and Maradona. I'm saying of those who've won it outside of these two. So that's where the conversation comes in. But even those guys, and I don't watch most of them, but in terms of what I've seen from a Messi and a Ronaldo, I think it actually is disrespectful to say that, well, their careers were not quite as good as they could have been because they did not win the singular cup. Again, I recognize what this cup is. It's got a story and a mythos unlike anything else that is on offer in the world of football. But because of just the sheer brilliance and the numbers and the magic that these two have given us over the period of time that they've produced, I think for them specifically, it's not something I feel takes away from their legacies that they didn't win it. I think it's something that could add to it. It's the only thing that could add to those legacies, but it's not something that I think that they need. The people who I do think need the World Cup, I have Neymar, because in terms of the talisman that have represented Brazil over the years, he'd be the only one who's never won a World Cup. Ronaldinho has a World Cup, Rivaldo has a World Cup, Romario has a World Cup, R9 has a World Cup, and he's then the guy who's taken on the baton as that guy. Him and Zico. Zico doesn't have a World Cup, but in our lifetime of those guys that have rattled off that we've seen, he'd be the only one. He has another opportunity, I would think, because he's 31. So there's another World Cup. This is probably the last one in his peak. Also what we've seen him do this particular season, how he started the season, and if he's healthy, and he also then has a muddied legacy at World Cups, because you think of him of all those videos that were produced, him rolling on the floor and screaming and all those other ridiculous stuff. He wins this, he firmly is the third best player of the era, and he's then in that room with those all-time Brazilian greats, and you think about him differently from all the times he's missed games because of things that have happened off the field and things of that nature. So it would be him, and I think I'd say as well Eden Hazard, only from the standpoint that the world has forgotten who this guy is because of his time at Real Madrid since leaving Chelsea. And I think if he goes on and has the performances, maybe not even at the absolute heights that we saw in 2018, but he's right there with Kevin De Bruyne, and you can very clearly see that he's contributing to the winning of this World Cup. If he has that vintage performance in this month of World Cup football, I think that also changes the way that we speak about him, that you then start asking, how great really was this guy, you know? So I would have those two as the guys who needed the most of the players going into this World Cup.
I think I want to add Harry Kane to the list, and I think not because people have forgotten how good Harry Kane is, it's because of the Spurs shirt that people overlook how good Harry Kane is, because I mean, hasn't won anything with with Tottenham.
In terms of team play, what does he have to show? Nothing,
you know, and he keeps racking up the goals. I mean, he's closing in on Alan Shearer's record, and he's going to be at some point have the most goals in the Premier League,
and in England,
and that's no small feat. So I mean, if you think about it, this guy has to show something for it. I mean, either get a trophy with Tottenham, and we banter with that, but also we think, especially now, they're nowhere close. So I think if he does this, and also with the stories of It's Coming Home, if Harry Kane wins it with the song in full flow that It's Coming Home, he shoots up like 10 times to however
winning
you rank
with
him.
England is a totally different thing.
And I mean, if you look at it, what he's done now, I mean, Sterling has gone off the boil a bit in terms of English attackers. Foden is all right, Grealish not quite. He's the only one who's still on song. So if anyone's going to score goals for England, it's going to be that guy. So if they get to the final, if they win, it's going to be through Harry Kane. And so if he does all of that and they go all the way, you can't tell the English nothing at that point. And if he's the guy at the center of that, I mean, it's like the Charlton and the Moors. If you can't, those are mystified legends at that point because of what they've achieved. So if he does that, through the roof, I mean, even Harry Maguire might need a World Cup to just say, guys, this is me, I did it.
He walks into the dressing room as the World Cup winner.
Not him cupping his ear against Montenegro where he scored. This is the World Cup, it's different levels. But yeah, I wanna put up Ronaldo. You said you don't think the GOATs need it. Don't you think he needs to remind people as well how good he is, or you don't think it's as bad as
Cristiano Ronaldo has nothing to prove to me. As much as, and for me, he never elevates above Messi, but that's a conversation against like one guy.
Yeah.
For me, as I said, like I have great respect. So as a Madrid fan, I saw Ronaldo. I saw him scoring the goals that took us to those treble of Champions League titles. Saw him start off in the El Clasico not scoring as many goals and ending that off as the more informed of the two. Everywhere he's gone, he's never disappointed. I've never been disappointed with Ronaldo in his career, and I did not think he was going to be this guy when I first saw him as a dribbling wizard, that kid with who needed dentistry and should have gotten the highlights out of his hair. And what he has done, I may have issues with what him sacrificing bits of his game to do this, but the singular mindset to go be the greatest of all time and to attack it as he has and to have the results that he has, for me, at 37 going on 38 in the desert over there in Qatar, what happens there does not make him a better, it elevates his legacy, but I'm not watching this World Cup thinking I need him to prove something to me. He's got nothing. He's not had anything to prove for a half decade.
Okay, I hear you. Last question before we close off. I want to know, and this is because we are putting who needs the World Cup more out there. Does the World Cup glory have sustained glory or glamour to it? Because if I think about Paul Pogba, we were like, okay, Paul Pogba is a Champions League winner, and this is off the back of a bad season with Man United, where he was bang average. He goes back to Man United and he's average again. And so, whereas with Mbappe, this announced that Mbappe is on the scene, and Mbappe has always been highly regarded since that tournament, and he's held that level. Does the World Cup actually add to that, to that esteem or clout for a player?
The World Cup is unlike anything else, Chuck, because even as I speak of a Pelé, the thing you speak about Pelé is the 3 World Cup titles.
Yes.
It's him showing up at 17 and doing that, and then in his last World Cup, the same thing. With Maradona, it's him being the tour de force in 1986. And unless you watch those guys with their clubs, which I've not really heard people talk about, like no one really talks about what they did outside of those World Cups. The World Cup has that kind of platform where you can speak about a guy purely based on what he's done at this tournament, and you can conclude how good of a player he was. So I think in time, maybe because we are living through where Paul Pogba is at the moment, it doesn't quite feel like that. But in time, you're going to talk about him as a World Cup winner. That's the thing with the World Cup winners. As I'm saying, when you start speaking about them that way, you don't tend to bring in but.
Details. It's just the fact
it doesn't tend to happen. Let me say that it doesn't tend to happen. Maybe that narrative changes now, but I don't really think so, because again, this is a trophy that exists in the imagination, unlike anything else.